The morning started like any other aboard the massive space station that orbited Earth. Commander Sarah Chen was reviewing supply reports when the first transmission cut out. Nothing unusual, their deep space communications always had their glitches. But when the second, third, and fourth signals went dead within minutes of each other, she knew something was wrong. "Martinez, run a full diagnostic on our communication array," she called to her chief engineer. The woman's fingers flew across her console, pulling up system after system. "Everything's green on our end, Commander. The problem isn't with us." Martinez looked up, confusion clear in her dark eyes. "It's like every signal from the Galactic Council just stopped." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. For 300 years, humanity had been part of the Galactic Council. They weren't the most important members, that honor belonged to ancient species like the Veltar and the crystalline Zephyrians. But they had their place, their voice, their responsibilities. The sudden silence was deafening. "Try the emergency channels," Sarah ordered. Military frequencies, diplomatic channels, even the commercial networks. Minutes passed. Then, an hour. Nothing came through except the background hum of space itself. It was as if the rest of the galaxy had simply vanished overnight. The first confirmation came from Earth itself. Admiral Harrison's weathered face appeared on the main screen, his expression grim. "Sarah, we're seeing the same thing down here. Every council communication has gone dark. No warnings, no explanations, no emergency signals. They're just gone." "All of them?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. Every single species that was part of the council. The Veltar homeworld, the Zephyrian colonies, the Kronak trading posts, nothing. It's like they evacuated the entire galaxy and forgot to tell us. Sarah stared at the screen, trying to process what this meant. Humanity had always been the newcomers, the junior partners in galactic affairs. They were tolerated more than welcomed, often dismissed as too young, too aggressive, too unpredictable. The older species spoke in careful diplomatic language about humanity's potential while making it clear they were barely civilized enough for inclusion. "What about our own people?" she asked. "Human colonies, research stations, military outposts? All accounted for and responding normally. Whatever happened, it only affected council species. We're alone out here, Sarah." The weight of those words settled over the command center like a blanket. Alone. After 3 centuries of being the galaxy's junior partners, humanity was suddenly the only civilization left in their corner of space. Over the next few hours, reports flooded in from across human space. Research stations that had been working alongside alien scientists found themselves abandoned. Trade stations saw their non-human partners disappear without explanation. Military joint operations were left hanging as alien ships simply vanished from their positions. Dr. Emily Watson, humanity's leading xenobiologist, appeared on screen from the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri. Her usually neat hair was disheveled, and her lab coat showed signs of a sleepless night. "Commander, I've been analyzing the data from our joint research projects with the Veltar. Everything was normal yesterday, routine genetic sampling, standard biochemical analyses. Then, this morning, their entire research team was gone. Not just gone, it's like they packed up centuries of equipment and research in a matter of hours." "Any signs of struggle? Emergency protocols?" "None. Whatever made them leave, they had time to prepare." "But, Sarah..." Dr. Watson paused, her voice dropping. "They left behind some interesting data. Research files they were keeping classified, even from us. I'm still going through it, but some of these readings, they suggest the council wasn't just studying genetics for scientific purposes." Sarah felt another chill. "What kind of purposes?" "I'm not sure yet. But there are references to biological compatibility assessments and species integration protocols. It reads more like military intelligence than academic research." Before Sarah could respond, Lieutenant Torres burst through the command center doors. "Commander, you need to see this. We just picked up a transmission, not from any council species, but from somewhere beyond the galactic rim." The main screen flickered, then resolved into a sight that made everyone in the room catch their breath. Ships. Massive, sleek vessels unlike anything in the council database, moving in formation toward the galaxy. Not hundreds, not thousands, but millions of them, stretching across space like a metal tide. The transmission that accompanied the image was short and delivered in perfect, unaccented English. Attention, remaining inhabitants of this galaxy. You have 72 hours to surrender unconditionally. Compliance will result in quick termination. Resistance will result in prolonged suffering. Choose wisely. Silence filled the command center. Sarah looked around at her crew, men and women who had served alongside alien species for their entire careers, who had always known their place in the larger galactic community. Now they were facing something the advanced council species had apparently been terrified enough of to flee without warning. "Get me Admiral Harrison," Sarah said quietly. "And patch me through to every human facility, ship, and colony in our network. We need to talk." Within minutes, faces filled the screen: military commanders, civilian governors, research directors, ship captains. The cream of human leadership, suddenly, thrust into a role none of them had expected to play. Admiral Harrison spoke first. "I've been in contact with Earth's leadership. The situation is unprecedented. Every major power is mobilizing what forces they can, but we're looking at invasion fleet that makes our combined navies look like a fishing expedition." "What about the council species?" Governor Martinez from the Titan colonies asked. "Surely they'll return to help defend the galaxy they called home for millennia." "We've detected massive energy signatures consistent with their technology moving away from the galactic core," reported Captain Singh from the Deep Space Monitoring Station. "Whatever scared them off, they're not planning to come back and fight." Sarah studied the faces on her screen. Fear was there, certainly, but also something else. A spark she recognized from humanity's long history of facing impossible odds. It was the same look their ancestors had when they first looked up at the stars, when they took their first steps on alien worlds, when they convinced a galaxy of ancient species to give them a chance. "So let me get this straight," she said slowly. "An invasion force that terrified species with millions of years of experience has given us 3 days to surrender. The entire Galactic Council has fled without warning, leaving us alone. And they expect us to just roll over." Captain Rodriguez from the Mars Defense Fleet cracked a grim smile. "When you put it like that, it sounds almost insulting." "It is insulting," Admiral Harrison agreed. "These invaders clearly did their homework on council species, but they seem to have missed something important about humanity." "What's that?" Dr. Watson asked. Sarah felt something cold and determined settling in her chest. "We're too stupid to know when we're beaten. And too stubborn to care if we did know." Laughter, actual laughter, rippled across the communication network. It was a sound that would have confused the ancient, wise species of the Council. When faced with certain destruction, they had fled to fight another day using logic and preservation instincts honed over millions of years. Humanity was considering a fight they couldn't possibly win. "Admiral, what's our actual military capability against this threat?" Sarah asked. Harrison consulted his datapad. "Earthfleet has 1,800 ships of various classes. The colonial militias add another 400. We've got some experimental weapons the Council never bothered to learn about, and our manufacturing capacity is actually quite robust. We've been supplying raw materials for Council military contracts for decades. And we know something the invaders don't," added Colonel Peterson from the Luna Military Academy. "We know every weakness, every limitation, every tactical doctrine the Council species used. If these invaders planned their strategy around fighting the Council's style of warfare, they might be in for a surprise." Sarah looked at the image of the approaching fleet, still days away from the outer rim of human space. "Dr. Watson, how long until you can finish analyzing that abandoned Veltar data?" "Give me 12 hours and I'll have everything they left behind decoded and analyzed." "Captain Singh, I want continuous monitoring of those invasion forces. Any change in speed, formation, or heading." "Already on it, Commander." "Admiral Harrison, I need you to coordinate with every human military force in the galaxy. Not just a defensive plan, I want to know every unconventional weapon, every experimental technology, every tactical advantage we might have." The Admiral nodded grimly. "And if none of that is enough?" Sarah looked around at the faces on her screen, humans who had spent their lives as the galaxy's junior partners, dismissed and underestimated by species that considered themselves infinitely more advanced. For 3 centuries, humanity had been told they were too young, too rash, too unpredictable to be trusted with important decisions. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy exactly what that meant. "Then, we do what humans do best," she said. we make them regret underestimating us. And if we're going down, we make sure they remember why you don't corner a species that conquered its own planet by being too stubborn to die." The communication ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the image of the approaching fleet. Somewhere in the dark between stars, species with millions of years of wisdom were fleeing towards safety, their careful plans and ancient knowledge leading them away from a fight they couldn't win. But they had forgotten something in their haste to escape. They had left behind a young, reckless species that had never learned the value of strategic retreats. A species that had looked at impossible odds before and decided to flip the table rather than play by rules that guaranteed defeat. The invaders had 72 hours to learn what the Galactic Council had never quite understood: sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one too stupid to know they're supposed to lose. Dr. Emily Watson hadn't slept in 20 hours, but the data flowing across her screens was more energizing than any stimulant. The Veltar research files were revealing secrets that made her stomach churn and her mind race with possibilities. "Commander Chen, you need to see this immediately," she transmitted from her lab. Her voice carried an edge that made Sarah drop everything and rush to the communication center. "What did you find, Emily?" The scientist's face was pale, but her eyes burned with discovery. "The Council didn't just abandon us, Sarah. They've been preparing to abandon us for over 50 years. These files, they contain detailed biological and psychological profiles of every human colony, military installation, and population center." Sarah felt ice form in her veins. "Profiles for what purpose?" "Initially, I thought it was standard xenobiological research. But the deeper files reveal something else entirely. They've been studying our combat effectiveness, our resistance to psychological warfare, our response to impossible odds. Sarah, they've been preparing the galaxy's defenses against these invaders for decades, and their plan never included humanity surviving." The screen filled with alien text and complex diagrams. Dr. Watson highlighted specific sections as she spoke. "Look at this tactical assessment from the Zephyrian Military Council. Quote, human unpredictability remains the primary variable threatening strategic withdrawal protocols. Recommend immediate isolation upon detection of Devourer's approach." End quote. Sarah, they call these invaders Devourers, and they've known they were coming for at least 2 generations. "The bastards," Sarah breathed. "They knew we'd fight instead of running, so they left us here as a distraction." It gets worse. There are communication logs here discussing something called the Human Buffer Protocol. The plan was to evacuate all Council species while leaving humanity in place to delay the Devourer advance. Our resistance would buy them time to reach whatever safe zones they've established beyond the galactic rim. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. 300 years of partnership, of serving alongside these species, of earning their grudging respect through blood and sacrifice. And, all along, they had planned to use humanity as expendable cannon fodder. "How long do these files suggest we might delay them?" Dr. Watson consulted her data. According to Veltar projections, human resistance should occupy the Devourers for approximately 6 to 8 months before complete pacification. Long enough for the Council species to establish new colonies in the Andromeda Galaxy. A bitter laugh escaped Sarah's throat. 6 to 8 months? That's longer than they think the entire Galactic Council could last? Apparently, our reckless aggression and refusal to acknowledge tactical reality makes us uniquely suited to prolonged resistance. Their words, not mine. Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Lieutenant Torres appeared on screen, his face flushed with excitement. "Commander, the invasion fleet just changed course. They were heading for the galactic core where the Council species used to be. Now they're coming straight for the Sol system." Sarah's mind raced. "How long until they reach us?" "At current speed, 48 hours. But, Commander, there's something else. We're detecting massive energy discharges from their ships. They're not just traveling, they're actively scanning. Like they're looking for something specific." Dr. Watson's eyes widened. "Sarah, there's another file here. A Chronac intelligence report about Devourer tactics. They don't just conquer, they hunt. They track fleeing populations using biological markers and energy signatures. If the Council species are broadcasting their location, the Devourers are following the trail," Sarah finished. "But why change course to us?" "Because we're not running," Torres said. "We're the only species maintaining our positions and defensive postures. From their perspective, we might be the only real threat left in the galaxy. Sarah stared at the tactical display showing the approaching fleet. Thousands of ships, each one larger than anything in Earth's navy, converging on humanity's home system. The Council had left them as bait, expecting them to buy time through desperate resistance before inevitable defeat. But there was something the ancient species hadn't counted on. Something they had never truly understood about humanity despite 3 centuries of partnership. "Get me Admiral Harrison, and patch in every senior officer in human space," Sarah ordered. "It's time for a strategy meeting." Within minutes, the command center filled with holographic projections of humanity's military leadership. Admiral Harrison appeared in the center, his weathered face grim but determined. "I assume you've all seen Dr. Watson's intelligence report," Sarah began. "We know why the Council abandoned us, we know these devourers have been coming for decades, and we know we're expected to die buying time for species that consider us expendable." Nods and angry murmurs rippled through the assembled officers. "The question is, do we give them what they expect, or do we give them something else entirely?" General Morrison from the Mars Colonial Defense spoke up. "With respect, Commander, what choice do we have? The math is simple, they outnumber us 1,000 to 1 with superior technology." "The math was simple when we first reached for the stars too," Colonel Peterson observed. "Or when our ancestors decided to leave their caves and explore a planet full of things that could kill them. Humans have never been good at math when it comes to survival." Captain Rodriguez pulled up tactical data. "I've been analyzing the invasion fleet composition. These ships are massive, heavily armored, designed for overwhelming firepower against static defenses. But they're also slow, predictable, and they're moving in formation patterns optimized for fighting Council military doctrine." "Meaning?" Admiral Harrison prompted. "Meaning they've prepared for a different kind of war than the one we're about to give them. The Council species fight with ancient honor codes, established battle lines, and predictable tactical doctrines. We fight like..." Rodriguez paused, searching for the right words. "Like humans," Sarah finished. "We fight dirty, fast, and without rules they can predict." Dr. Watson's image appeared alongside the military officers. "I've found something else in the files. The Devourers have encountered resistant species before, but always species that fought conventionally. There are no records of them facing guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, or opponents willing to sacrifice strategic value for tactical advantage." "You mean they've never fought anyone crazy enough to ram a battleship with a cargo hauler?" Captain Singh noted with a grim smile. "Exactly. Every species they've conquered fought logical, strategic campaigns. They've never faced opponents who view acceptable losses as a starting point rather than a limit." Admiral Harrison studied the fleet projections. "What's our actual timeline?" 48 hours until the main fleet reaches the Sol system," Torres reported. "But we're detecting advanced scouts already probing the outer colonies. First contact could happen within 12 hours. Sarah looked around at the assembled faces, men and women who had spent their careers as junior partners in galactic affairs, always deferring to older, wiser species. For the first time in 3 centuries, humanity was going to fight its own war, using its own tactics, without anyone telling them to be more civilized about it. "Admiral, I want every ship in human space repositioned. Forget defending fixed points, we're going full mobile. Hit and run, strike and fade, make them chase us through every asteroid belt and debris field in our territory." "That's a complete departure from standard Council military doctrine," General Morrison observed. "Good. The Council's military doctrine got them so scared they fled the galaxy." "Captain Rodriguez, what's our unconventional weapon status?" Rodriguez consulted his data pad. "We've got experimental plasma torpedoes the Council declared unnecessarily destructive. Kinetic kill vehicles they considered inhumane. And those gravity well generators the Zephyrians said were tactically unsound." "Tactically unsound meaning?" "Too dangerous to use safely. High chance of collateral damage to our own forces." Sarah nodded. "Perfect. Dr. Watson, how quickly can you reverse engineer the Council's evacuation technology? Their dimensional gateway generators?" "I could have basic functionality within 36 hours, but, Sarah, those systems were designed for evacuation, not combat applications." "I'm not planning evacuation. I'm planning the opposite. If the Devourers are tracking fleeing populations through dimensional signatures, what happens if we use those same generators to create false signals? Understanding dawned in Dr. Watson's eyes. We could make it look like massive fleets are fleeing in multiple directions. Force them to split their forces chasing ghosts. While the real fleet hits them where they don't expect resistance, Admiral Harrison added approvingly. It's insane enough that it might actually work. There's one more thing, Dr. Watson said, her voice dropping. The files contain detailed information about Devourer biology. They're not just conquerors, they're parasites. They need to consume other civilizations to survive, literally feeding off their technology, culture, and biological diversity. So they can't just destroy us, Captain Singh realized. They need to assimilate us intact. Which means they have limitations on the weapons they can use against populated worlds, Sarah concluded. They can't just glass our planets from orbit, they need to take them relatively undamaged. Admiral Harrison's smile was predatory. So we make sure every planet they want is a fortress, and every fortress is a trap. Exactly. They expect resistance, but they expect it to be honorable, strategic, and, ultimately futile. Instead, we're going to give them the kind of war humanity spent millennia perfecting before we ever reached the stars. Total war, Colonel Peterson said softly. The kind the Council species always said we needed to evolve beyond. Sarah looked at the countdown timer showing less than 40 hours until first contact. Somewhere beyond the galaxy's edge, ancient species that had survived for millions of years were fleeing towards safety, their wisdom telling them that discretion was the better part of valor. They were probably right. The smart play, the logical choice, was to run and live to fight another day. But humanity had never been accused of being smart or logical when survival was at stake. Send a message to every human facility, every ship, every colony, Sarah ordered. Tell them the Galactic Council has abandoned us to face an invasion force alone. Tell them we're outnumbered, outgunned, and not expected to survive. And then? Admiral Harrison asked. Then, tell them we're going to make these Devourers regret every tactical assumption they've made based on studying civilized species. It's time to show the galaxy what 300 years of being the dangerous newcomers actually taught us. As the meeting broke up and officers returned to their commands, Sarah remained staring at the approaching fleet. The Council species had planned to use humanity as a delaying tactic, expecting them to fight bravely and die heroically while buying time for the truly important civilizations to escape. But they had miscalculated. They had never understood that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their courage or their technology, it was their absolute refusal to accept that any fight was unwinnable. When faced with impossible odds, humans didn't calculate survival probabilities. They just got angry. The first Devourer scout ships hit the outer mining colonies exactly when predicted. Captain Maria Santos watched the attack unfold from her position in the asteroid belt, her modified freighter hidden among the rocks while automated mining platforms exploded like fireworks below. The alien ships moved with predatory grace, their dark hulls seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. They didn't just destroy the mining equipment, they consumed it, breaking down metal and circuitry into component atoms before drawing the resources into massive storage bays. Just like the files predicted, Santos whispered into her comb, they're not raiders. They're harvesters. The response came from Admiral Harrison aboard the flagship Defiance, currently hidden in the shadow of Europa. Acknowledged, Captain. All units, you are observing textbook Devourer harvesting behavior. Note how they process materials and move in systematic patterns. These aren't warriors, they're farmers, and they think we're the crop. Santos watched the lead Devourer ship pause over the ruins of Mining Station 7. A beam of sickly yellow light played over the debris, and she could see twisted metal flowing upward like liquid, being absorbed into the ship's hull. The sight made her stomach turn, but it also confirmed everything Dr. Watson's intelligence had suggested. Admiral, they're not even posting guards while they feed. They're completely focused on resource absorption. Copy that. All attack groups, you are cleared for engagement. Remember, we're not trying to win this fight, we're trying to teach them they're not the only predators in this galaxy. Santos gunned her engines and burst from the asteroid field, her ship's experimental weapons already charging. Behind her, a dozen other converted freighters and mining ships emerged from hiding spots throughout the belt. The Devourers had planned for military resistance. They hadn't planned for a swarm of civilian vessels turned into guided missiles. The lead Devourer ship was massive, easily 10 times the size of Santos's freighter, but it was also completely unprepared for an enemy that charged straight at it without regard for survival. Santos armed her ship's gravity well generator, a piece of experimental technology the Zephyrians had deemed too unpredictable for military use. For Earth, she screamed into the comb as her ship slammed into the Devourer's hull. The gravity well generator activated on impact, creating a localized spacetime distortion that tore through both ships like they were made of paper. Santos had just enough time to see the alien vessel's hull crumple inward before the explosion took her vision. Across the asteroid belt, similar scenes played out as human ships turned suicide runs into art forms. Captain Chen's mining barge detonated its plasma charges inside a Devourer cargo bay, triggering a chain reaction that left the alien ship venting atmosphere and debris. Lieutenant Morrison's converted yacht somehow managed to ram 2 enemy scouts simultaneously, taking out their formation leader in a collision that defied several laws of physics. The Devourer response was swift and deadly. Beam weapons lashed out from the surviving ships, turning human vessels into vapor with casual efficiency. But, for every human ship destroyed, they learned something new about their enemies. The aliens were powerful, but they were also predictable. They followed tactical doctrines, maintained formations, and seemed genuinely confused by opponents willing to trade their lives for minimal damage. Phase 1 complete, Admiral Harrison reported as the last human ship in the asteroid belt exploded in a burst of defiant glory. All ships report Devourer reaction patterns consistent with Dr. Watson's projections. They're treating us like a malfunction, not like an enemy. Commander Sarah Chen watched the tactical display from her position aboard the research station now serving as humanity's mobile command center. The asteroid belt engagement had cost them 30 ships and 300 volunteers, but the intelligence gained was priceless. The Devourers weren't just powerful, they were complacent. They had spent so long hunting fleeing prey that they had forgotten how to fight cornered animals. Dr. Watson, analysis of the wreckage? The xenobiologist's voice came through clearly despite the exhaustion evident in her tone. The beam weapons are energy-based, but they require line of sight and stable targeting. The ships themselves appear to be partially organic. I'm detecting biological components integrated with their technology. Meaning they can be poisoned? Colonel Peterson asked from his position coordinating ground defenses. Potentially. But, more importantly, it means they need to heal between engagements. Unlike our ships, which can be repaired mechanically, they need time for biological systems to regenerate. Sarah studied the fleet movements on her display. The main Devourer force was still approaching Sol System, but their advanced scouts were now moving more cautiously, maintaining tighter formations and posting guards while they harvested resources. They're adapting, she observed. But they're adapting to fight an enemy that uses conventional tactics. Time for Phase 2? Admiral Harrison asked. Sarah nodded, though he couldn't see her. Initiate Operation Broken Arrow. All units, you are cleared for unconventional warfare protocols. Across human space, ships that had been hiding in the outer reaches of solar systems suddenly came alive. But these weren't warships in any traditional sense. Captain Rodriguez emerged from the shadow of Jupiter's moon Io in what appeared to be a damaged civilian transport, broadcasting distress signals and leaking atmosphere in a convincing display of a ship fleeing the battle zones. The nearest Devourer patrol took the bait immediately. 3 sleek alien vessels moved to intercept what they assumed was escaping prey, their formation loose and confident as they approached the apparently helpless human ship. Rodriguez waited until they were close enough to smell his ship's hull before triggering the surprise. His damaged transport was actually a heavily modified military vessel packed with enough antimatter to crack a moon. The explosion lit up Jupiter's orbit like a brief second sun, taking out all 3 Devourer ships and sending a shockwave that shattered ice across several of the gas giant's moons. Similar deceptions played out throughout human space. Civilian evacuations that turned out to be military strike forces. Abandoned space stations that exploded when the Devourers tried to harvest them. Resource deposits that were actually clusters of kinetic kill vehicles waiting for targets. But the most effective deception was taking place in the Mars orbital shipyards. The Devourers had detected massive energy signatures suggesting humanity was trying to evacuate their population, and a significant portion of their fleet diverted to intercept what they assumed would be fleeing refugee ships. Instead, they found Admiral Harrison waiting with the entire Earth defense fleet arranged in a formation that violated every principle of sound military tactics. Instead of defensive lines or strategic positions, the human ships were scattered randomly throughout Mars' orbit, some flying upside down relative to their neighbors, others spinning slowly as if their crews had lost control. The Devourers approached cautiously, confused by the chaotic human formation. Their own ships maintained precise military discipline as they closed distance, beam weapons charging for what should have been a simple slaughter of disorganized prey. Admiral Harrison waited until the enemy was committed to their attack before revealing his hand. The random human positions weren't chaotic at all, they were precisely calculated to create overlapping fields of fire that would catch the Devourers in a crossfire from every direction simultaneously. All ships, weapons free. Show them how Earth's children say hello. The space around Mars erupted in violence as humanity's experimental weapons fired all at once. Plasma torpedoes that the Council had considered too destructive carved through Devourer hulls like hot knives through butter. Kinetic weapons deemed inhumane by galactic standards punched holes clean through enemy ships. Gravity well generators created localized space storms that shredded anything caught in their fields. The Devourers fought back with deadly efficiency, their beam weapons picking off human ships with mechanical precision. But, for every human vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear from hiding spots among Mars's moons. Captain Singh led a squadron of converted cargo haulers in a suicide run that split the enemy formation. Lieutenant Parker's experimental fighter craft somehow managed to land inside a Devourer ship and detonate from within. The battle raged for 6 hours. When it ended, the human fleet was reduced to less than half its original strength, but the Devourer force was completely destroyed. More importantly, they had broadcast everything back to their main fleet. Intelligence reports coming in, Dr. Watson announced from her analysis station. We intercepted Devourer communications during the battle. There, confused doesn't cover it. They're sending reports about tactical insanity and prey behavior inconsistent with galactic norms. Sarah allowed herself a tired smile. What are they doing now? Slowing their advance. Requesting reinforcements. And, Sarah, they're asking their command structure for guidance on fighting an enemy that actively seeks mutual destruction rather than survival. Admiral Harrison's battered face appeared on screen from his damaged flagship. Phase 2 complete. We've bloodied their nose and made them think twice about treating us like easy prey. But, Commander, we've lost over half our fleet, and their main force is still incoming. Sarah looked at the tactical display. The numbers were still overwhelming. For every human ship that remained, there were hundreds of Devourer vessels approaching. By any rational analysis, humanity had already achieved more than anyone expected. They had proven they wouldn't die quietly, and they had forced an enemy that had conquered countless civilizations to actually take them seriously. But rational analysis had never been humanity's strong suit. Dr. Watson, what's the status on the evacuation technology reversal? The dimensional gateway generators are ready for deployment, but, Sarah, using them the way we discussed, the energy requirements alone could destabilize local spacetime. Meaning? Meaning we could tear holes in reality that might never heal. We could damage space itself in ways that make these star systems uninhabitable for millions of years. Sarah looked around at her command crew, exhausted men and women who had just watched their species achieve the impossible by fighting the galaxy's most feared enemy to a standstill. They had proven that humanity belonged in the same conversation as ancient species with millions of years of experience. But the Devourers were still coming, and they were no longer underestimating their prey. Get me a communication link to the main Devourer fleet, Sarah ordered. It's time to introduce ourselves properly. Lieutenant Torres looked up from his station in shock. Commander, we don't have translation protocols for their language. Then, broadcast in every language we do know. If they've been studying the galaxy for as long as the files suggest, they'll understand at least one of them. The connection opened with a burst of static before resolving into an image that made everyone in the command center step back. The Devourer commander wasn't entirely organic or entirely mechanical, but something that seemed to shift between the two states. Its voice, when it spoke, sounded like grinding metal given speech. Small prey species. Your resistance has been noted. Surrender now, and your consumption will be swift. Sarah stepped forward, looking directly into what might have been the creature's eyes. I am Commander Sarah Chen, speaking for humanity. We have a counteroffer. Prey do not make offers. We're not prey, Sarah said calmly. And we're about to prove it. You see, You made one critical error in your intelligence gathering. You studied the wrong species. The Devourer commander paused, its form seeming to solidify slightly. Explain. Sarah smiled, and there was nothing pleasant about the expression. You prepared to fight the Galactic Council ancient, wise species that valued preservation over victory. But, the Council abandoned us here specifically because we're not like them. We're young, reckless, and we have one trait that apparently terrifies every civilized species in the galaxy. Which is, when cornered, we don't just fight back. We make sure that anyone who threatens us regrets it for the rest of their existence, however short that might be. The transmission cut to static, but Sarah wasn't finished. She had one more message to send, and this one wasn't for the Devourers. The message Sarah transmitted wasn't directed at the approaching Devourer fleet. Instead, it traveled along frequencies the Galactic Council thought humanity was too primitive to access, the quantum communication networks that connected the fleeing species to each other across impossible distances. This is Commander Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command, broadcasting on all Council emergency frequencies. For those of you who might be listening from whatever safe distance you've managed to reach, we want you to know that your human buffer protocol is proceeding exactly as planned. In hidden bunkers throughout human space, Dr. Watson's teams were making final preparations for Operation Ragnarok. The dimensional gateway generators had been modified far beyond their original specifications, turned from evacuation tools into something that would make the ancient gods of destruction proud. Your calculations were correct, Sarah continued her broadcast. We are too stupid to run, too stubborn to surrender, and too aggressive to die quietly. We're going to buy you exactly the time you planned for, maybe more. But, we want you to understand something about the price we're paying for your strategic wisdom. On Europa, Captain Torres was making final adjustments to the gravity well generators that would create a cascade effect throughout Sol system. On Mars, Admiral Harrison was distributing the last of humanity's antimatter reserves to volunteer crews who wouldn't be coming home. And, on 1,000 human worlds, civilians were saying goodbye to everything they had ever known. We've spent 300 years trying to earn your respect, trying to prove we belonged among the galactic community. We fought your wars, followed your laws, and accepted your judgment that we were too young and dangerous for real responsibility. Well, congratulations. You're about to see exactly what you've been keeping on a leash all this time. The Devourer main fleet was 6 hours out from Earth when the first gravity well generator activated. The massive alien ships, designed to move in perfect formation through normal space, suddenly found themselves fighting against spacetime distortions that made navigation impossible. Ships that had traveled together for millennia were scattered across light years in seconds as local gravity went insane. Phase 3 is active, Admiral Harrison reported from his position near Jupiter. The gravity wells are fragmenting their fleet exactly as projected. We've got isolated Devourer squadrons scattered throughout the system. Sarah watched the tactical display as humanity's final gambit unfolded. Instead of meeting the enemy in one decisive battle, they had turned the entire Sol system into a maze of gravitational anomalies and spatial distortions. The massive Devourer fleet found itself broken into manageable pieces, each group facing the full fury of desperate human defenders. The battle for Earth's moon lasted 14 hours. Captain Rodriguez led the Lunar Defense Force in a fighting retreat that cost the Devourers 50 ships for every human vessel destroyed. When the last human fighter finally fell, the alien invaders found themselves in control of a lifeless rock that had been booby-trapped with enough explosive charges to crack a continent. The explosion could be seen from Earth's surface, a brief second dawn that lit the night sky before fading into memory. Lunar Command is gone, reported Lieutenant Torres, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. But, they took out the entire Devourer assault group. Similar scenes played out across the system. The asteroid belt became a graveyard of ships from both sides as human miners turned their knowledge of zero-gravity demolition into tactical advantages the Devourers couldn't counter. Mars fell after a siege that cost the aliens 3 entire fleets, and, even then, only after every human defender had died at their posts. But, it was Dr. Watson's final contribution that would be remembered long after the battles were forgotten. The modified dimensional gateway generators didn't just create false evacuation signatures, they tore holes in space itself, creating permanent scars in reality that would make the Sol system a navigation hazard for any species that tried to cross it. Dr. Watson to all commands, came the transmission from her research station as it fell under final assault. Dimensional charges are armed and ready for detonation. If we're going to die here, we're taking this whole section of space with us. Sarah made the hardest decision of her life. All remaining ships, fall back to minimum safe distance. Dr. Watson, you are clear to proceed. The explosion that followed wasn't visible to human eyes. It existed in dimensions that normal matter could barely perceive, but its effects rippled through spacetime like a stone thrown into a still pond. When it was over, the Sol system no longer existed in any recognizable form. Instead, there was a maze of gravitational anomalies, dimensional rifts, and spatial distortions that would take any spacecraft years to navigate. The surviving Devourer ships found themselves trapped in a system that had become a death trap. Every time they tried to regroup, another gravity well generator activated. Every time they tried to retreat, they discovered new spatial anomalies that made faster-than-light travel impossible. And, scattered throughout this nightmare, the remaining human defenders continued to fight with the kind of vicious determination that had carried their species from caves to the stars. 3 months later, the last Devourer ship fell to a coordinated attack by human survivors operating from hidden bases in the outer system debris fields. The invasion force that had terrified the Galactic Council into fleeing the galaxy had been completely destroyed by a species they considered barely civilized. But the cost had been everything. Earth was gone, consumed by dimensional fires that burned in colors that had no names. Mars was a shattered ruin drifting through twisted space. The colonies that had taken centuries to build were now graveyards marking humanity's final stand. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the last operational human military vessel, looking out at what had once been her home system. Fewer than 10,000 humans had survived the battle, scattered survivors on research stations and deep space facilities that had been far enough away to escape the dimensional catastrophe. "Ma'am," reported Ensign Collins, one of the youngest members of the surviving crew. "We're receiving a transmission on Council frequencies. It's from the Veltar evacuation fleet." The image that appeared on screen showed an alien Sarah recognized Ambassador Threndell, who had served as humanity's primary council liaison for 20 years. His crystalline features were arranged in what Sarah had learned to recognize as profound shame. "Commander Chen," the Veltar said, his voice carrying harmonics of distress. We have been monitoring events in your system. We must speak." "Must we?" Sarah replied coldly. "I thought the Council had said everything that needed saying when you left us here to die." "Commander, please understand." "Understand what? That you spent 50 years planning to use us as disposable soldiers? That you knew these Devourers were coming in, decided our lives were worth less than your strategic withdrawal? That you abandoned an entire species because we were too inconvenient to evacuate?" Ambassador Threndell's form seemed to dim with each accusation. "You are correct. There is no justification for our actions." "But, Commander, you must know, the Devourer invasion force was only the first wave. Intelligence suggests their main fleet contains over 10 million ships." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. 10 million? And you let us fight a scouting force of 20,000? The projections suggested that human resistance would delay them for months, allowing us time to prepare defenses in our new territories. "But, Commander, the Devourer's main fleet has turned around. They are retreating from this galaxy entirely." Silence filled the command center as the survivors processed this information. Sarah found her voice first. "Retreating? Why?" "Because word of what happened here has spread. The Devourers have never encountered a species willing to destroy their own star system rather than surrender. More importantly, they have never faced opponents who could actually eliminate their forces entirely. You didn't just resist them, you proved they could be defeated. By destroying everything we try to protect. By showing them that some prey are too dangerous to hunt. Commander, the quantum signatures from your dimensional weapons are unlike anything the Devourers have encountered. They appear to believe that humanity possesses weapons capable of damaging spacetime itself." Sarah looked around at her tiny crew, the last representatives of a species that had just committed suicide to win a war. "Do we?" Dr. Watson's voice came from the engineering station where she was analyzing the aftermath of her own weapons. "The dimensional generators created permanent rifts in local spacetime. The effects are spreading slowly, but, within a few thousand years, this entire region of space will be uninhabitable. We've essentially created a dead zone in the galaxy. A dead zone that will stand as a monument to what happens when someone tries to harvest humanity," Admiral Harrison added from his salvage vessel. "The Devourers might have retreated, but every species in this galaxy will know the price of underestimating us. Ambassador Threndal's image flickered as his transmission continued. Commander, the Council wishes to, that is, we would like to offer, no. Sarah's voice was flat and final. The Galactic Council made their decision when they abandoned us. We made ours when we chose to fight. Those choices have consequences. But, surely, with so few survivors, you will need assistance. We'll manage. We always have. Sarah looked out at the twisted space that had once been humanity's home. Tell your council something for us, Ambassador. Tell them that the next time they encounter a species too young and dangerous for their taste, they might want to reconsider their approach. What do you mean? Sarah's smile was cold as stellar void. You spent 300 years teaching us to fight your way, follow your rules, and respect your ancient wisdom. But, you forgot that before we met you, humanity spent millennia learning a different kind of warfare. You turned us into civilized soldiers. She paused, watching the dimensional storms still raging where Earth had once orbited. But, we remember what we were before. And, now we're free to be that again. The galaxy is a big place, Ambassador. Plenty of room for a species that doesn't play by anyone else's rules. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts and the handful of humans who had survived their species' greatest victory. They had saved the galaxy from the Devourer invasion, but the cost had been everything they had ever built or loved. But, in the twisted remains of the Sol system, something else was taking shape. The dimensional rifts weren't just scars, they were doorways, gateways to regions of space where different laws of physics might apply. The gravity wells weren't just weapons, they were tools that could bend spacetime to human will. Humanity had lost their home, but they had gained something else, freedom from the expectations and limitations imposed by species that thought they knew better. Free from council oversight, free from diplomatic restrictions, free to explore the kind of science and technology that civilized species considered too dangerous. Sarah looked at the tactical display showing the locations of humanity's surviving outposts. 10,000 people scattered across dozens of remote facilities, cut off from everything they had known but not defeated. Never defeated. Ensign Collins, she said finally. Send a message to all surviving human facilities. Tell them we're regrouping, and we're going to rebuild. Rebuild what, ma'am? Earth is gone. Our colonies are destroyed. We don't even have enough people to maintain genetic diversity. Sarah's smile was sharp enough to cut stars. We're going to rebuild the one thing humanity has always done better than anyone else, being unpredictable. The Council thought they knew us well enough to use us as cannon fodder. The Devourers thought they understood us well enough to harvest us. She gestured toward the dimensional storms still raging in Earth's former orbit. Let's make sure nobody makes that mistake again. In the depths of space, where twisted physics created new possibilities with each passing moment, humanity began its second chapter. They had entered the galactic community as junior partners, grateful for acceptance and eager to prove themselves worthy of respect. They would return as something else entirely, a species that had chosen mutual destruction over surrender, that had turned their home system into a weapon, and that had proven civilized society's greatest fear. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one with nothing left to lose. The galaxy had wanted to see what would happen if humanity was left alone to face impossible odds. Now it would learn the answer to that question, whether it wanted to or not.